Hello, welcome to another episode of In the Trenches with Gang Green. I'm your host, Bubbs. Today is Monday, July 22nd. Hopefully, everybody is having a good day so far today. The second podcast of the day earlier this morning. If you haven't checked it out already, definitely go check it out. We had our first installment of the New York Jets player previews episodes that will be rolling out every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday morning. Two players, one on offense, one on defense, all throughout those 3 days, every single week up until week number 1. So definitely stay tuned. A lot of content from that standpoint. And of course, a lot of training camp content to discuss as well. Today, this is episode 329 of the In the Trenches with Gang Green podcast. The New York Jets report tomorrow, and I wanted to discuss my full training camp preview. Cannot wait to get out to training camp. I was lucky enough. I've got the first 3 dates. I'll be going this Thursday, the first open practice to the public. I'll also be going Saturday, and I'll also be going next Tuesday. So can't wait to get out there. This is one of my favorite times of year. I know there's a lot of people out there that, like draft season, like free agency, outside of course, the regular season of the NFL is, of course, everybody's favorite time because that's the regular season, the playoffs, of course, that's the meat and the heart of the NFL season. That's why we are all fans to go watch our team every single Sunday. But in terms of the offseason stuff, training camp's one of my favorite times of the year. It's summertime. All it is optimism. The weather's nice. You get out to camp. The fans are excited. Love making episodes, almost daily content, pretty much recapping every single practice. So it's going to be awesome. It's going to be great. It's going to be a lot of fun here, really, over the next month and a half. So can't wait to break it all down with all of you. We'll also get into the New York Jets release some uniforms. So we'll start with that here quickly before we get into our full training camp preview. However, before we begin, let me tell you about our podcast partnership, starting with SeatGeek. SeatGeek is an app that takes tickets from all over the internet and puts them into one place to make it easier for you, the buyer. And what's great about SeatGeek, one of their awesome perks, when you download the app, when you go onto the SeatGeek app and you go to find your tickets for whatever event you are trying to get a ticket for, they give you a scale from 0 to 10 to know what type of deal you are getting. A green means good. Yellow means it's an okay deal. There could be better. Red means stay away. Plus, my viewers, click the link in the description down below to download the SeatGeek app. My viewers, use promo code BubsOnSports for $20 off your first purchase at SeatGeek. Once again, that is promo code BubsOnSports for $20 off your first purchase at SeatGeek. And this isn't just football tickets. This isn't just Jets tickets. This isn't just sports. Anything that you can buy a ticket for, concerts, plays, shows, you name it. If you can buy a ticket for it, SeatGeek has it. Use promo code BubsOnSports for $20 off your first purchase at SeatGeek and get yourself out to some of the best events out there. Also, Huga House. You've seen me rocking my Huga House hat all the time here on the program. You want to get the hat I'm wearing often, or even the hat that Aaron Rodgers wears often, even Shane Gillis, even Shohei Ohtani, JT Realmuto, division rival Josh Allen. Plenty of celebrities and high-end athletes rock the Huga House apparel. Click the link in the description down below. That'll take you to the Huga House store. And at checkout, use promo code BUBS for 15% off your purchase and get yourself some of the Huga House swag. Get yourself some of the hats that QB1, Aaron Rodgers, who will be out there tomorrow, is rocking as well. Now let's get to quickly here the uniforms before we get into our full training camp preview itself. So the New York Jets, of course, released their new uniforms earlier this offseason, and that was awesome. Exactly what the fans wanted, exactly what the fans have been asking for really since last offseason, where the Jets gave us their legacy white uniforms, which they wear a couple times last year. Of course, obviously Monday night opening up the season was the debut of those uniforms. They were awesome. They looked great under the lights. And then they rolled out the other crappy uniforms for primarily the rest of the season. Obviously, they also wore those legacy whites against the Chiefs. And I think that was it. Just those 2 games. They might have worn them other times. It might have been, I forget. But either way, we kind of got part of it last year. They kept wearing those other uniforms, though. And in this offseason, we finally got our wish. And then today, they released another classic uniform. The classic, a timeless tradition lives on. The New York Jets will wear these uniforms on October 14th, 2024 against the Buffalo Bills on primetime Monday Night Football. So for the second year in a row, when Buffalo visits the Jets at MetLife Stadium, we'll be back on primetime, and the New York Jets will be rocking these beautiful uniforms in that game. Just one time this year, they will be wearing it, and it'll be against the Buffalo Bills. Now, here are some of the details of the uniform. It's obviously the classic logo, the logo that this team wore for a very long time up until 2019. Shoulder, pant, and sock stripes are from the 2000s. Super Bowl III nameplate and numbers, Super Bowl III face mask, and current legacy color green. So a little bit of a mix of all different times, the 2000s, Super Bowl III, and even now the new legacy green, which they'll be wearing in their other uniforms. So these are awesome. I love that logo, the classic logo. I think for a lot of Jets fans, that's kind of the logo you grew up on. Of course, even you go as far back with those Super Bowl numbers, the Super Bowl gray face mask, which they wore all the way back to Super Bowl III, which some Jets fans go all the way back to the Joe Namath, Broadway Joe days. The only Super Bowl this team has ever been in, has ever won. So awesome to see that from the New York Jets. And now you look at their 2024, 2025 uniforms. I mean, those are beautiful. And you have to we have to show a side-by-side. Shout out to NFL Fashion Advice on Twitter for giving us this side-by-side of the old uniforms from 2019 to 2023 to these new uniforms right here. I mean, those old uniforms are so bad, so ugly, so just terrible looking back on how bad those were, especially the amount of losing that were done in those uniforms. And then you look at the uniforms there on the bottom, and they are beautiful. And I don't know what's actually the bigger upgrade. Is it the uniforms or the talent? I mean, look at the talent difference. You got Robbie Anderson, Quincy Enunwa, and then you got Garrett Wilson. You have Sam Darnold, and now you got Aaron Rodgers. You have Leonard Williams, and now you've got a defensive trio of C.J. Mosley, Jermaine Johnson, and Quincy Williams. I mean, is there a bigger upgrade too? Chris Herndon as well. Tyler Conklin's not in this photo, but I mean, come on now. Tyler Conklin, a massive upgrade over Chris Herndon. And of course, you got Blitzboy there to the left of Sam Darnold, or to Darnold's right. So talent upgrade, uniform upgrade. Just quickly wanted to break that there as those uniforms came out just a little while ago. Now let's get to our New York Jets training camp preview. 2024 New York Jets report tomorrow, Tuesday, July 23rd. First practice Wednesday, first practice open to the public Thursday. Can't wait to get out to Florham Park. It's going to be an absolute blast. It's going to be a great summer full of Jets camp. All right, so I'm going to break this down kind of in three different ways. I'll start with some of the biggest storylines going into camp, and I'll kind of combine some of the biggest storylines with players to watch for throughout camp. And then we'll also look at some of the biggest position battles. And it's actually interesting. The New York Jets don't enter camp with a ton of position battles from a starting perspective. There's a lot of position battles depth-wise, but I think that just speaks to the talent on this roster that, for the most part, we know who the starters are. The starters are proven guys or young guys that are on the rise. And in a lot of these position battles really come at depth at some of these positions, but there aren't a ton of position battles. You really kind of feel great if this team stays healthy about where this roster is at. And that's a credit, of course, to Joe Douglas in the front office, taking what was a team that was kind of a shell of themselves last year and making multiple major moves, both through agency and in helping out through the draft as well, to build this team where they are right now, which is one of the best rosters on paper in franchise history. And of course, one of the best right now in the NFL. So some of the biggest storylines, look, I'll start with Aaron Rodgers. Now, I'll be honest, I'm not really that worried that Aaron Rodgers is going to come out here in training camp and look like half of what he's been, or look completely washed up, look completely slow. No, I mean, this is a guy that we've already seen throughout OTAs looked healthy. You saw even last year when he was working with scout team, he looked like he can go out there and play. Now, those were all video clips. Those were all things like, none of that was really seen in person by us, the fans. But from what you've seen, from what you've heard from the teammates, from what you've heard from this coaching staff, Rodgers looks fine. He's moving fine. Like, he looks good. I'm not really worried about seeing Rodgers in person and be like, man, he looks slow. He looks rusty. He looks like he doesn't have trust in his Achilles. No, look, I think more of the Rodgers storyline is going to be more of a national headline than it is a local New York Jets fans headline. Because, I mean, let's be honest here. Egypt, right? That got blown out of proportion. He went on Part of My Take yesterday or at the golf tournament in Lake Tahoe. The video was actually uploaded yesterday. In the interview, he basically said how it was a giant blown out of proportion situation. Mini camp is even what it used to be. So I think the Rodgers coming off of injury is going to be more of a bigger storyline for the national media. If there's any moment where it looks like he's walking slow, or if there's any moment where it looks like he might be favoring his Achilles, people are going to be like, oh, look, Aaron Rodgers looks slow. You've already seen it. So I don't think it's much of a storyline for Jets fans. I think it's more something for the national media. But again, just as a Jet fan, to see him back out there, to see him throwing passes to Garrett Wilson, getting all these guys involved, just, doing what he was able to do last year at camp, right? The no-look passes, absolutely just, going up and down the field. We saw tons of times where 2-minute drills that the New York Jets ran, he would execute them perfectly. And just, there was so many positives, even the preseason game with the touchdown to Garrett Wilson, just seeing that stuff again is great and will be great to see. Not even so much seeing that he's healthy, but seeing his connection with these receivers that he built up last year prior to the injury. So that's one of the biggest storylines. Another big storyline is Hassan Reddick, the contract. Another thing, too, I want to get these two out of the way because I don't think they're going to be storylines for very long. Hassan Reddick, this deal is going to get done. I'm not panicking. I'm not worried. I think this is something that'll get done by the end of this week, early next week. I don't think this lasts much more than a week, 2 weeks. I mean, anything more than that, I think, would be a really bad look for the New York Jets if this thing lasts for 2 weeks into August. I think this is going to be something that will get done, if I had to guess, latest by the beginning of next week. Maybe he misses the first 3-4 practices, but then is back out there next week, back out there for the joint practices against Washington and things like that, where they'll start their, preseason games a week after. 2 weeks this Saturday will be their first preseason game. So I believe so. Maybe not. No, I think it is. Or is it a week? I don't know. Whenever it is, he'll be out there for those preseason games. I'm not too worried about it, but it is a storyline because he held out and, he held out. Like, he held out. He's held out of all the offseason stuff, but it's still, he's been training. He's ready to go. I don't think this is going to be something. Look, the New York Jets aren't going to trade him for Hassan Reddick. Know that he has a contract situation, still trade for him, and then have him sit out this year. That's not going to happen. There's a 0% chance that happens. It'll get done, but it's still a storyline and something to look forward to, or look at. Not really look forward to, but something to keep an eye on to see how much longer it kind of draws out. Some other storylines. The offensive line. And this isn't a negative storyline. Last year, the offensive line was more of a negative storyline because we really had no clue what the starting combination was going to be. This year, that's not the case. We know left to right, if healthy, it's going to be Tyron Smith, John Simpson, Joe Tittman, AVT, and Morgan Moses rounding out that right side. The storyline will come with the chemistry, right? Playing together, making sure they're remaining healthy, how they look together. The good thing with this offensive line is they've kind of had a couple months already to build chemistry. I know OTAs, Tyron Smith was limited a little bit, right? You also had Morgan Moses didn't do a whole lot coming off the torn pec. So they didn't do a ton, but they were working together and they've gotten to know each other. They've gotten to work even just film-wise together. They are so much further ahead than they were last year, where Dwayne Brown essentially, if you remember, had 2 practices. Felt like 2 practices, and then boom, he was out there week 1 against the Buffalo Bills. We all know what happened, right? That's not the case with this offensive line. But one of the storylines will be is just the continued chemistry, how they look, right? You don't want to have that where they look kind of all out of sorts like we saw last year. You still want to see this offensive line go out there, be productive, play well, look good in those joint practices. Because one of the biggest problems with the Jets offensive line last year was the way they looked in the joint practices. I remember I was actually at the Buccaneers joint practice, and I remember seeing it was all out of sorts. Like the Buccaneers were all over that offensive line. This year, seeing what they do in the joint practices. Another storyline, something to watch for as well, will be how they handle Tyron Smith, how they handle Morgan Moses, right? those guys will get some of those veteran off days. They won't be out there a ton, and that's a good thing. You don't want to overuse those guys in training camp because at the end of the day, training camp, none of this counts, right? The preseason games don't count. Like none of this matters once regular season starts. So you want to also limit those guys. It'll be interesting to see how much the Jets limit them, how much they're actually out there, even Aaron Rodgers' usage, how much they have him out there, because at least now you have Tyrod Taylor who can actually operate the offense when Aaron Rodgers isn't out there, and you can still get good reps, still get good action as a receiver, as opposed to last year when you had Zach Wilson take over after Aaron Rodgers. So that's one of the positives, even if Aaron Rodgers doesn't practice every single day or is limited one of these days to manage his Achilles, to manage his health. You trust Tyrod Taylor can go in there and step in during camp. And then, of course, you got Andrew the Summer of Peasley as well. So that's another storyline. Of course, coaching as well, I think, is another one. This isn't even so much like training camp wise. It's just more of a season storyline. Robert Saleh, Nathaniel Hackett, the entire offensive coaching staff, essentially. And then, of course, defensively, you trust all of them. You trust Jeff Ulbrich. You even trust Robert Saleh to have this defense ready to go for week one, to have this defense ready to go for another big season. The concern you have is Nathaniel Hackett, the rest of the offensive coaching staff, Keith Carter, those type of guys. How will they help develop? How will they develop an Olu Fashanu? How will Carter Warren develop? How will these other young players develop with this offensive coaching staff? Because there's only so much Rodgers can do, and we'll kind of see the development of some of these young guys, how the coaching staff runs things with those guys, how they, use those guys in camp, what they're doing to help develop some of these young guys. That's more the coaching stuff. Look, if the Jets lose a preseason game, nobody's going to be calling for it. You're not going to be sitting there, the Jets lose a preseason game, they're going to be calling for Robert Saleh's head. No, that's not what I mean. But it is still a headline. It's still something to look out for. It's still something in training camp that will loom over this team all year until they start winning. Once they start winning or they make the playoffs, that'll be the only point where it's not talked about. But until this team actually wins and puts it together on the field, the coaching is going to be a question. The coaching is going to be a headline. Offensive chemistry, kind of similar to the offensive line, right? Rodgers regaining that chemistry he had with Garrett Wilson. We've already seen what he did in OTAs. Again, that was in shorts, though. Continue to carry that over into camp would be good. We talked about the offensive line already, them building chemistry. Don't know how much Mike Williams we will see. I think he'll be on a similar pattern as Breece Hall was last year, where we'll see him more towards the end of camp, but we're not going to see him a whole lot. So there's not going to be a ton of chemistry between Rodgers and Mike Williams probably being built. However, the flip side of that, though, is Mike Williams is a veteran. He's been in the league since 2017. Aaron Rodgers has been in the league for ages. These two guys are veterans. It's not like a rookie trying to, like Mike Williams, if there was a guy that can jump right in and fit right away with Rodgers, it would be Mike Williams because he's a veteran. He's been around for a while. Veterans tend to build chemistry faster than a veteran and a rookie trying to connect. So we'll see how that goes. Also Malachi Corley, see how Rodgers and them get those guys involved, even Braylon Allen, all these younger guys, new additions. And then Mike Williams, too, coming off of injury. That'll be a storyline, something to look out for. How much of Mike Williams we will see, again, not a ton, but when he's out there, just seeing what he looks like, similar to Breece. Breece last year, when he was out there in camp, the couple plays that he had, you could already see he looked 100% healthy. So kind of seeing that with Mike Williams. And then, of course, Mike Williams as well, or Breece Hall as well, had an 82-yard run in week one, which you knew right away he was going to be good to go. So those are some of your biggest storylines. Again, I mean, Rodgers is the biggest one. I think that was more of a storyline last year than it is this year, because last year was, Rodgers coming over, all this. Now I think it's more so the national media is going to take it and run with it. If there's the blisters, remember the blisters during OTAs when he was sitting on the back of, looked like a trailer or something, fixing his socks or taking off his socks or whatever because he had a blister. And everyone's like, Rodgers is hurt. It's like, what? What? So the media is going to take some of these things and run with it. That's not really so much a local storyline. Anyway, some players to watch for. Kind of a long list here. I'll kind of mesh some of these into what I was just saying. Olu Fashanu, I think, is a big one, and I think Olu Fashanu is going to get a lot of reps because Tyron Smith's going to get limited a lot, and rightfully so, right? You want to keep Tyron Smith fresh. You want to keep him healthy for the regular season, a guy that hasn't played a full season since 2015. I always say, to put that in perspective, Ryan Fitzpatrick was coming off of a all-time great season for his standards that year, was the last time Tyron Smith. It's almost been a decade, to put it simply. So Olu Fashion is going to get a lot of reps, and he's going to get a lot of reps in these joint practices. The Jets have joint practice against the Commanders. They got joint practice against the Panthers, and they've also got joint practice against the Giants. All three of their preseason opponents, they have joint practices again. So that's going to be valuable reps for Olu Fashion. Preseason's going to be valuable reps for Olu Fashion as well. Tyron Smith's not going to be playing preseason games. Fashion will be. So these are all great reps, great chances for Olu, seeing how he develops, seeing how he progresses. Throw him in at left tackle. Keep him at left tackle. Let Tyron Smith coach him up, develop him, help him out. Do not move Fashion all around like they've tried to do to AVT or like they tried to do with Mekhi Becton. Carter Warren is your right tackle developing behind Morgan Moses. Olu is your left tackle behind Tyron Smith. Seeing him develop, seeing him protect Rodgers' blind side, especially in some of those joint practice environments, is going to be great. It's going to be great learning opportunities for him. So those are guys that he's a guy, one of the guys I'm most excited to see, right? First round pick, all that stuff, that I look to see constant development throughout training camp. Malachi Corley is another one. Rookie, right? Another guy. Very interesting to see what his role is during camp and how much of the ones he gets with, how much reps he gets with Rodgers, what the Rodgers connection look like. I'm really looking forward to that because I think I really think it's a kind of a battle right now between Corley and Gibson, it feels like, between the starting slot in week one. If Corley shows, because Corley kind of had to seem like a quiet OTAs. He was doing a lot more stuff on his own, just kind of learning the playbook, doing stuff on his own, that sort of stuff. It didn't really seem like he was as much involved in the offense first team wise, which is normal for a rookie, right? They're easing him into things. They're not going to throw him in the fire the first day. But now it's camp, joint practices, preseason are all going to be very critical for Malachi Corley. A guy with high expectations, right? He's drawing comparisons to Deebo Samuel. Third round pick, a guy the Jets were in love with, a guy a lot of us fans were in love with, right? The Yak King provides awesome explosiveness and a guy that Aaron Rodgers has always used, the type of player like Malachi Corley. So I'm really interested to see how much Corley gets involved with Rodgers, how much they connect, and the chemistry they're able to build. Because if Corley looks good and he's playing well, and if they have a connection, Corley will be your starter on opening night. But if he's kind of developing and taking things a little slower, then it'll probably be Gibson. So that's something to look for early on, is Corley. Braylon Allen, another one, right? Just another player, another rookie, 1-2 punch behind Brees. He had a very good OTAs, Braylon Allen. Again, though, that was shorts and T-shirts. So now what can he do in camp? What can he do in joint practices? All that stuff. But it seemed like him and Aaron Rodgers built up a pretty good connection through those 10 or so OTA practices that they had in the spring. Isaiah Davis as well, kind of the same line as Allen, rookie running back, fighting for that depth spot, special teams usage as well. One of the biggest guys I'm looking for, Jeremy Ruckert. I need to see a good amount from Jeremy Ruckert in training camp. I need to see a good amount of production, especially in these joint practices. It feels like right now, Jeremy Ruckert has yet to kind of take off, has yet to kind of have that moment where it's like, man, this guy's really taking over. He's really developing. It's kind of feels like ever since Jeremy Ruckert has came into the league, he's not plateaued, but he hasn't made a ton of progress. And that's not all him, right? That's not all on him. A lot of it's the quarterback. He kind of redshirted his first year, barely played last year. He was the number 2 option. Hackett didn't really do a great job getting him involved, and the quarterback was awful, right? So they had that issues. But now entering year 3, he's kind of out of excuses. And I think you need to see a lot of production out of Jeremy Ruckert in camp, in joint practice, and even in the preseason games to give yourself confidence. Because outside of Tyler Conklin right now, you kind of feel like, okay, Jeremy Ruckert needs to take a step up. If not, Then it's up to Kenny Yeboah, who's been good all the time for the Jets in camp. Yeboah every year is a training camp preseason darling, but doesn't do much in the regular season. Doesn't end up really playing at all. So if Rucker doesn't do well in camp or doesn't really move a needle much in camp, isn't really much of a talking point during camp, and Yeboah is doing, good things as always, can you really then you're kind of in that tough spot where maybe Yeboah is more of your number 2 pass catching tight end, and then Ruckert's more of your blocking tight end. But can you really trust Yeboah, who every year it's the summer of Yeboah, it feels like. Every year it's training camp darling Kenny Yeboah, and then he never really plays in the regular season. So Ruckert's got a little bit of pressure on him to perform here in camp, to give Jets fans, to give this team, to give this coaching staff confidence that he can go out there and be productive in the regular season and not just have this tight end room essentially a one-man crew of Tyler Conklin and Jeremy Ruckert and Kenny Yeboah, who don't do a whole lot. Like, you want to legitimately say, all right, Tyler Conklin, when he's not on the field, you can trust Jeremy Ruckert to go out there and make a big play. Go out there, become a good route runner, get open, be a dual threat tight end as a blocker and a pass catcher. You want to confidently say that you believe he can do that coming out of camp. So he's a player to watch for. Carter Warren, his development, very same thing with Fashanu, right? Warren played a little bit last year, showed some good things. I think the biggest thing with Warren is looking at his technique this camp, seeing how it got better. And I think if you see his technique get better, I think that's a positive. Xavier Gipson, another guy to watch for. New kickoff rule. It'll be interesting to see how that affects him, how that affects the entire NFL, but he's definitely one to look out for also as well, right? How does Gipson look in camp? Gipson has kind of been hyped up a little bit this offseason in terms of maybe a potential starting role if Malachi Corley isn't ready right away. But the only way Gipson can do that is to perform well during camp in the preseason. So Gibson's another name. Jordan Travis, I don't know how much we'll see of him. He's starting, I think, on the PUP list. So I don't really know how much we'll see of actually Jordan Travis. A lot of it will be Tyrod Taylor and Andrew the Summer of Peasley. Can't wait to see Andrew Peasley sling it. That's going to be a lot of fun with the third and fourth team. So that'll be fun late in these preseason games with pretty much nothing on the line at all other than pride. Peasley's going to be out there throwing dots, so that'll be fun. But when or if Jordan Travis gets out there, he's going to be probably pretty raw. So I don't think we should expect him to do a whole lot, but a name to watch for. Quantez Stiggers as well, had a really good OTAs. Can he carry it into training camp? It'll be fun to see what he can do in the preseason against some of these NFL wideouts or NFL level wideouts. And then Allen Lazard, I don't even know. Allen Lazard's such a sensitive topic among Jets fans. And I don't even know. I don't even know what to expect out of Lazard. I really do not know what to expect out of Allen Lazard. I really don't. And I've said this for a while now, and I'll do a player preview on Allen Lazard, and I'm sure I will try my best to give you as optimistic as I can. I try this time of year to be as optimistic as I possibly can. I try to be. And I think you guys know that. During the regular season, I'm whatever the team's doing. But when it's training camp, the weather's nice, there's no reason to be upset. There's no reason to be glass half empty. I always try to be glass half full this time of year. But I just can't be glass half full with Allen Lazard. Every time I always say to myself, and this is what I'm telling you, Lazard can't be any worse than he was last year. So I don't know if that's a good thing. I don't know if that's a bad thing. I don't know what that means. That's what I've kind of been describing my expectations for Allen Lazard this season, is he can't be any worse than he was last year. So I guess that's a positive, but what does that mean? That also means like he was the worst receiver in football last season. He had 23 catches for 311 yards. He got benched. So technically, if he goes out there this year, has 30 catches for 400 yards, that's improvement. But that'd still be an awful season. So my expectations are Allen Lazard are really just wait and see. But he's a name to watch, right? He's a name to watch. I don't think the Jets will cut him. I also think there's part of Aaron Rodgers that's similar to the way that he's got a chip on his shoulder for himself. I think Rodgers probably has a little bit of a chip on his shoulder for Lazard. This is a guy that they were teammates for a while in Green Bay, and Lazard had some of his best seasons in Green Bay. It was he played his first 5 years in Green Bay. So his best year came in 2022 with Rodgers. He had 788 yards and 6 touchdowns and 60 receptions, right? It looked like he was kind of on the brink of, signing with when he signed with the Jets and paired up with Aaron Rodgers, it looked like Lazard could be a really solid option alongside Garrett Wilson. That was obviously the complete 180 of what actually happened. He was one of the Jets' worst players on all sides of the ball, not just offense. He was probably their worst player. He was that bad. But I do think there probably is part of Rodgers that wants to get Lazard, similar to how everybody's doubting Rodgers, and he wants to shut up the haters. He probably wants to shut up the haters for Lazard a little bit and show, hey, he's got me at quarterback. He's going to improve, and I'll keep him in check. He's not going to be kicking around soccer balls and doing all that nonsense and basically quit on the team. And I think that's the biggest thing with Lazard is he quit on the Jets last year. It's going to take him a lot for him to get this fan base to buy back into him and for this coaching staff too to believe in him. I just don't think they'll cut him. I think they would swallow like $18 million in dead cap. I just don't see that happening. I think this will probably be it for Lazard. He'll play off this year. They'll get rid of him. They'll dump him off in the offseason. Saleh kind of hinted to that in one of his post-game press conferences last year. He was like, we have him for another year, even though it's a 4-year deal, but they can get out of it after 2. So this will be it for Lazard, I think. Unless if he goes out and dominates, but I just don't think he's going to get the targets because of the guys in front of him. He was that bad last year. He's probably at best is your 4th option. But even then, you can say the Jets might still go out and sign a receiver, and he would drop on the depth chart. So I don't really know what to say for Lazard, but he's a name to watch because you would like to see some sort of life. You'd like to see something. OTAs, he had some drops, he had some struggles, and then there was moments where Rodgers would talk to him in between plays, and then they would connect. So maybe if Rodgers can get in his head and pressure him a little bit and motivate him, he can play better, but he was that bad. He would need to take a massive, it would be a complete, he's got to completely turn his career around, a complete 180. He was that bad. So it was hard. And then Will McDonald, another name, right? Jermaine Johnson, Hassan Reddick, your edge rush, your top 2 edge rushers. But with Bryce Huff gone, with JFM gone, Will McDonald's going to play a much bigger role. And Will McDonald playing well now will not only help the Jets this year, but it's also for the future. Because you look at this Jets edge rusher room, right? You went from JFM, can play outside, can play inside, and Bryce Huff. Both those guys are gone. Huff to the Eagles, JFM as well to the Broncos. Still a trade that I think has a lot of Jets fans scratching their head, myself included. Either way, he's gone. There's no going back. You can't redo it. It is what it is. But in the event that Hassan Reddick most likely is a 1-year rental, let's say, and if he's gone after this season, then you would be looking at a 2025 edge room for the New York Jets. If Will McDonald doesn't take a significant jump this year, it would be Jermaine Johnson, and that's pretty much it. Because then you would be, Will McDonald would be entering his 3rd year without taking a significant jump in year 2. So you would not have any real faith in him. It would be up to Jermaine Johnson. You would have pretty much 3 holes at the position. So Will McDonald producing well in camp, setting himself up for a big regular season, hopefully a big postseason as well for a big year, not only helps the Jets this year, but it also helps him for the future. Because as of right now, we don't know what he's going to do. Ideally, he takes a year 2 jump like Jermaine Johnson, but we'll see, right? They're 2 different players. We'll see what happens. That's the ideal situation. But in the event that he doesn't, you're looking at a pretty bad 1st-round miss. So he's a guy that you would like to see start on the right foot in camp. All right, now some position battles. Again, the Jets have set up their roster where they are immensely talented, very talented, and there's not a ton of position battles when it comes to a starting role. Maybe Gibson, Malachi Corley, you can say, is a battle. We'll see what the Jets do with Corley, how much they kind of give him the rookie treatment in a way and ease him into things, or how much they kind of just say, hey, go out there and let it fly. You got Rodgers. Let's get the connection going early. We'll see. That's kind of a battle for a starting role. But really, the other battles, one of the biggest battle, I think, is probably for the 4th edge rusher spot. And that's between a couple guys, in my opinion, right? Right now, you have Jermaine Johnson, Hassan Reddick, Will McDonald. Those are your 3 edge rushers. Your 4th edge, though, is the question. It's kind of, in my opinion, and I know right now Michael Clemens is the front runner there to win that spot. Player that could play on special teams. The Jets coaching staff really loves him for some reason. He's really done absolutely nothing in his first 2 years with the Jets. He's done nothing. He really hasn't. Like his first season, rookie year, all right. He showed some positives. Last year, he bulked up and put on weight to play the inside. Wasn't any good on the inside. So now year 3, you've seen nothing out of him in the first 2 seasons. But the Jets coaching staff still seems to like him a lot. So I still think he's the front runner. But outside of Clemens, you've got UDFA Eric Watts out of UConn is a name to look out for. Another UDFA in Braden McGregor out of Michigan, a guy that I actually thought the New York Jets could take in the later rounds. They got him as a UDFA, a guy that stood out during OTAs. So he's a name to look out for is Braden McGregor. They also added Tack McKinley after OTAs. They signed him to their camp roster. A reclamation first-round pick in Atlanta, spent 4 years there, spent a year in Cleveland, spent 1 year with the Rams, didn't play at all last year. So he'll get a chance this year to make the 53. So Tack McKinley, Braden McGregor, Eric Watts, Michael Clemens, all 4 of those names are battling for one spot. So that's going to be really intriguing. I think that's one of your biggest battles. Jermaine Johnson, Hassan Reddick, Will McDonald. But then it comes down to what's that 4th edge spot? Do the Jets value Michael Clemens where they hope he could take a year 3 jump? He plays special teams. The Jets value special teams a lot. Do they just roll with him? Or do they roll with one of these other guys, Tack McKinley, who showed enough to get a contract for camp? Braden McGregor, UDFA. Eric Watts, UDFA. All guys that showed some good things during spring workouts. So we'll see. That's a position battle. Another position battle, to me, is running back 4. I think obviously your 1-2 punch is Breece and Braylon Allen. I think your 3rd is Isaiah Davis. I think Isaiah Davis will play primarily in a special teams role. I think he can return kicks potentially. We'll see. But your 4th running back, I think, is between 2 guys, Izzy and Tariq Cohen. I don't really know what the Jets are going to do with Izzy. I think he barely got involved in the OTAs. Like he was working with not even sniffing first team reps at all. And there was a couple times Tariq Cohen was actually already getting first team reps. Izzy wasn't even getting any first team reps. And that's OTAs where they rotate guys all over the place. You know, there's guys that will never be starters for the Jets that were getting first team reps. Izzy wasn't even getting first team reps. He was on the second, third team all the time. So I don't really think Izzy, I would not be surprised if Izzy gets cut. And I think Izzy's probably one of your prime cut candidates. And another reason I think that could happen is Tariq Cohen's a veteran. He can also return kickoffs. The Jets have brought in a couple guys that can return kicks on top of what they already have in Xavier Gipson. But Tariq Cohen's a veteran. I know he hasn't played since 2020, but he's 28 years old. He'll be 29 in 4 days. So this is a guy that can return kicks and is a veteran in that room. If you keep Izzy, your oldest player is then Breece Hall, who is 23 entering his 3rd year. Tariq Cohen would be that veteran. So I think the Jets could choose the veteran. I know Izzy did return kicks at times last year. Wasn't very good. But I think the Jets might choose that veteran in Tariq Cohen, returning kicks, 4th running back, won't play much, but is a veteran, than Izzy. Izzy didn't show you a whole lot last year. He really didn't. He really did not. He didn't show you much of anything. And I don't think he showed you much of anything during the spring workouts. And I really think the Jets are so down on him. Because if the Jets weren't down on Izzy, they wouldn't have went out and added Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis with back-to-back picks. And then they wouldn't have signed Tariq Cohen if they believed in Izzy. Bringing in 3 running backs in the offseason just lights a fire under Izzy. So I would not be surprised at all if Izzy gets cut. And I think that's kind of a competition. 2 guys battling for that final running back spot. Safety depth's another one. It got a little more complicated with Isaiah Oliver, who was signed on this offseason was a corner in San Francisco and Atlanta, has ties with Ulbrich to his days in Atlanta, but a guy that's been in the league for 6 seasons, 5 of those in Atlanta, played 1 year last year with the Niners, a rotational corner piece throughout his career, but now he's switching to safety. So he's another name in that safety room. Now, the Jets safeties right now, as of currently stands, the starters are Tony Adams and Chuck Clark. Tony Adams at free safety, Chuck Clark at strong safety. Chuck Clark's kind of that hybrid safety linebacker type guy, can play the box. We did a player preview on him this morning. Definitely go check that out. We'll have all of our player previews set up on a playlist, so definitely go check that out for those of you on YouTube, and of course, those of you listening on audio podcast platforms. It's all up all over the place wherever you get your podcast. So we discussed Chuck Clark, but outside of those top 2 guys, and it could get complicated too if the Jets sign Justin Simmons or Quandre Diggs or one of those guys that are waiting out for a contract here as camp rolls on. But depth, right? You have Ashton Davis. And then your final safety spot, if you hold 4, it's like Jalen Key, Mr. Irrelevant, Jarek Bernard Converse, who can do a little bit of everything in the secondary, athletic, good in coverage, can play corner, can play safety. So I think he probably is a front runner. But then you also added Isaiah Oliver, also plays safety. And then you also have Al Blades Jr. as well, who's a UDFA. So it feels like, in a way, you have 4 guys battling for that final safety spot. That'll be interesting, depth-wise, at the safety position. And it'll get even more interesting if the Jets go out and sign, let's say, a Justin Simmons, because then everybody will bump down on the depth chart. Your duo, your tandem will be Simmons and Chuck Clark. Adams will back him up. Then you would add Ashton Davis, and essentially all these guys would be completely on the outside looking in. So those are interesting. That's another interesting battle there, safety depth. O-line depth as well. Let's say the Jets hold 10 offensive linemen. You have your starting 5 and Tyron Smith, Simpson, Tittman, AVT, Morgan Moses. And then after that, Olu Fashanu, Carter Warner, locks. So you have 7 players right there. You have 3 spots. Wes Schweitzer, Brady Latham, Chris Glazer, Xavier Newman, Cole Laval, who they signed UFL standout. You essentially have 5 guys fighting for 3 spots. Another name we haven't mentioned, Connor McGovern, still available. He could be a name that the New York Jets go out and sign during camp and bring him in as a depth. And if they sign Connor McGovern, then there's your 8th offensive lineman. You have then 8 guys, and those 5 guys we just mentioned would be fighting for 2 spots. Max Mitchell's another name that's going to be fighting for a spot. So really you have 6 guys, let's say. I would tend to say Wes Schweitzer probably makes the team because he can play everywhere, and I think the Jets value that, and I value that as well. I think that's important. You know, in a spot where you're getting banged up one game, Schweitzer can step in and play everywhere. He's played at least 1 snap at every single position. And I think that's really valuable. I would be against letting Schweitzer go. I would be against cutting him. But then again, that's not my decision, so we'll see. But I think Schweitzer will remain on this roster. I think he'll make the team as depth. So that'll be your 8th. And then it's, let's say you sign McGovern. Okay, you have 9. And then it's like Max Mitchell, Xavier Newman, Brady Latham, Chris Glazer, Cole Laval. Who fits in for that last spot or 2? That's something that'll be very interesting. So those are some of your biggest position battles. You want to say Corley versus Gibson a little bit, that's fine. I think some of the other big ones, your 4th edge rusher, your running back 4, your safety depth, and also offensive line depth. You have about 6 guys fighting for at most 3 spots. So 3 will get cut, and it could be some surprising names, so we'll see. Anyway, that's your full New York Jets 2024 training camp preview. Let me know in the comments section down below. What are you looking forward to most in training camp? Who are you looking for the most in terms of players? Your biggest storylines, list them. List them in the comment section down below for those of you watching on YouTube. Your biggest storylines, players to watch for, and your biggest position battles. Can't wait for camp tomorrow. I am sure we will get a ton of content. The New York Jets obviously report tomorrow. So I think they speak to the media. I think tomorrow is like media day, so I'm sure we'll hear Saleh. I'm sure we'll hear Rodgers. And then Wednesday's the first practice. First practice Wednesday. That'll be awesome. And then first open practice to the public, which I'll be in attendance for, so can't wait for that, will be Thursday. So let's go. Training camp is here. I am fired up. Football is back. Jets, Jets, Jets. We'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.